So today I want to share a tip that I use to really learn how my mix should sound overall. So when you listen to a finished recording, you're hearing all of the sounds together, and some of those sounds are masking other sounds, and the effect of them can be very different to how they sound in isolation when you solo out a group. So what if there was a way that we could get inside a song and listen to just the individual group? A lot of artists have started doing remix competitions, and these are a really great way to get inside a song that you like the sound of and work out how it works. Today we're going to go through some stems that I've downloaded from a remix contest, and we're going to just talk about drums. But you can apply this technique to any of the instruments in a particular song. If you like the sound of that song or that instrument, you might be able to find a remix contest for it or for something similar where you can get inside the stems and have a quick look at how they're achieving the effect that they're achieving, and then you can apply that in your own work. So I've got some stems here from a remix pack. I'll just play them through. Okay, so it doesn't sound like there's a lot going on in there, but let's just have a listen to each track in isolation quickly and see what's actually happening. Okay, so in the kick channel here, we've got a long kick followed by a short kick, and on the long kicks, they've added some extra processed Foley sounds, so some top end stuff. So let's have a listen to that quickly again. And if you throw an EQ on here, you can actually see a little bit better what's going on. So all of this stuff up here beyond 1K is actually not necessarily the kick. There's the click of the kick, but then there's some additional sounds. And if we turn that into a low pass, most of the Foley sound is located in the upper range and most of the kick is located in the lower range. So that's giving the kick the impression of taking up much more of the frequency spectrum than it actually is. Let's have a listen to the snare. So they're doing a similar thing there again. The first snare rings out a lot more, has more reverb on it, and then the second snare is truncated a little bit shorter. Let's see if there's anything interesting happening by looking at it on an EQ. So you can see that this snare has a few different peaks in the frequency range. If I make that bigger, there's one here, there's one here, and then that reverb tail is actually pretty loud compared to the transient of the snare. That initial click is the transient, but that wash happens all the way up here above 1K. Let's have another quick look. Okay, and there's nothing happening in this snare below 100 Hertz, so they've high-passed it. So this marching snare comes in a little bit later. Let's just have a listen to the loop with the marching snare in it so you know what happens. So you can hear that the marching snare adds pace and energy, but it's not really dominating in any way at all. Let's just duck in there and have a listen. Okay, so it's just doing a roll. Is there anything interesting happening frequency-wise? Look at that, it's almost dead flat, and it's only from 100 Hertz up all the way to just above 10K. So we can see from the frequency spectrum that they're using this to create more movement and to create more energy in that part of the track, but they're not letting it dominate any one particular frequency. It's an overall pushing of the levels. This perk 1 stem, let's have a quick listen to that. So again, there's variation between the hits. There's a louder one and then a softer one. What's really interesting about this noise is that it's got some tonal element to it. It actually sounds like a resampled string pluck or something like that. Let's check it out on an EQ. So you can see these peaks in here. That's where the tonal element's coming from. You can see they've left no low end in there at all. And aside from the initial pluck, it doesn't really extend into the top end at all. It's really focused in the mid-range area. So let's listen to the loop when that comes in. So it almost plays the role of a snare. So it's got a little bit of that sharp transient on it, but then it's got that tonal element which chills things out a little bit. You can see in the actual mix down that when the snare does come back in, it comes back in at a lower volume so that these two can blend together. Okay, and then this percussion 3 channel down here, let's see what's going on in there. Okay, so there's all sorts of percussion elements going on in there. None of them are particularly dominating. There's that low boomy tom, which is the only thing happening in the bass region, and all the rest of it is short, sharp, transient noises that are taking place in the high frequency. So they're adding a bit of fizz and a bit of sparkle to the sound, but they're not taking over as a main instrument. So in the past, what I've done when I'm starting a song is that I'll come up with a really basic loop. Here's what I've got so far. So what can we learn from the stems that we just looked at to make our loop more interesting? Well, the first thing is that the overall sounds can be sculpted a little bit. Our kick seems a little bit too thuddy, so I've used a frequency shifter to push it up in the frequency range a little bit. I've then high-passed it and taken out some of the low mids. This is without those changes, and this is with those changes. It's subtle, but it does make a small difference. Okay, so here's our snare as it is at the moment. Let's listen for changes we might want to make based on what we heard in the stems. It's a very short snare. It doesn't have a lot of ambience to it, and it could do with just a little bit of finessing. So let's have a go at that. Okay, so I've EQ'd it a little bit. I've used a vocoder to add some noise. I've used a reverb to add some ambience to it, and then I've pushed all of that through a glue compressor a little bit just to make it louder. So let's do some comparisons between what we had before and what it sounds like now. So the vocoder is adding a fair bit of noise in the top end, and the reverb is adding in a nice ambient tail on the back. Our hat sounded like this before. Okay, to me that sounds pretty okay. I've taken out the lows just in case. Our loop still sounds pretty boring. Although it's a small improvement. Let's compare it to the stems. So there's a lot more activity in the stems. Let's go through and add similar levels of activity to our loop. We'll add some cymbals, add some additional percussion. Here's what those sound like. So you can hear already we've got a whole bunch of ambient stuff going on in the background from the cymbal channel, and we've got a few more little percussive elements happening from this thicket kit. We can use some other tricks like adding in some Foley just before the snares. And then if we wanted to go over the top, we can add in some additional percussion. So to me that's probably overly busy, but when I'm writing drums I like to go too busy and then strip out elements that don't work. So comparing with the stems from our remix contest downloads, and then comparing the tone of our drum loop at the moment, let's see if it's similar. Yeah, it's not too far off. I hope that's helpful, and I hope you go download some stems and then learn what you can from just poking around in the stems that you get. You might be looking for mix tips, you might be looking for how things sound in isolation, or you might be looking at the structure of how the song is put together. I hope you enjoy.